So if your athlete's getting ready for a game, you showed up to a tournament or before practice and you want them to perform at their best, one of the best methods to use to do that is working on hip activation. I'm gonna show you a quick warm-up you can do to kind of get your hips activated, work on your glutes, fire up the muscles that your athlete needs to be explosive, whether they're running, jumping, cutting, staying low, whatever it is. That's gonna be the powerhouse. So let me show you real quick. So a simple tool that we can utilize are mini bands. They're these things right here. All right, small, not too big, can fit in your bag. So the reason why we use mini bands is because what we're gonna do is we're going to put these around our legs just above our knees. I don't want these on my knees because I don't want them on any part of my knee that's movable. So I don't wanna damage or injure them or risk any chance of injury, I should say. So what I'm gonna do is demonstrate how we set these up and then get into a couple of warm-ups that you can do real quick and then explain what type of band you should be using first of all, before I get to that. So this, there's different bands out there. There's different companies, obviously. This one is pretty light. It's not that, doesn't offer that much resistance compared to some other ones. And you don't need one that offers a lot of resistance. A lot of kids will kind of gravitate towards the heaviest band, but then that limits their posture, the mobility, and their ability to perform the movements properly. So what I would suggest is start with a lighter band. You don't need anything super heavy. You just want to go ahead and turn the muscle on. You don't want to fatigue it. So let's demonstrate this real quick. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna put the mini bands on. I'm gonna take my shoes off real quick because it makes it easier. What I'm gonna do is just put the mini bands on right here. Bam, and balance, coach. No, I don't have to have it perfect. I've got the band kind of weird. A lot of kids will fix it because if they're wearing shorts, it kind of sticks to the legs, but for the sake of getting this through faster, I'll just go from here. So I've got the bands just around my knees. Now what I want to do is I want to position my feet a little wider than my body. Now depending on how I feel comfortable, my toes can either be pointed forward or slightly outside. Now as I get into this position, I'm going to drop into what we call either a base or athletic position. They mean the same thing to me. So a base position is pretty much the position that I'm athletic in. Athletic position, no matter your sport, I can be a shortstop in baseball, a goalie in hockey. I could be a basketball player here on defense, a linebacker in football. This is a position you're gonna find yourself in a lot athletically. So what I wanna do here is I wanna make sure my knees are positioned directly over my second toe, the toe next to my big toe, and I'm gonna hold this in with an isometric hold, where I'm dropping into my posture, getting low here, and I feel the sides of my hips, right? My glute medius, those muscles there kind of turning on, and they're starting to feel a little bit like they're burning a little bit. That's great. I typically hold this for about 10 seconds and then we'll relax, shake it out for a second. I'll check to make sure athletes felt the muscles working where we want them to, and then we'll drop into it again. What tends to happen is athletes sometimes, we'll have to make this correction, their feet are too close together, so they're like this, so there's no resistance, forcing the muscles to have to activate. So what we'll do is, I'll say make sure your feet are a little wider than your body, and then they'll get to here, and their knees will cave into like this valgus, where their knees are kind of going towards each other. I tell them push your hips out, and so what tends to happen is they just move their feet wider like this, but they still keep this. So keep your feet where they are. I want my knees, my hips to open up in that position there. So make sure that you're doing this versus just making your feet wider. The wider your feet are, then the less your hips are actually gonna feel the actual activation that you want. So we're locking this in for about 10 seconds, and we'll start with that one. We'll do that maybe twice with a 10-second isometric hold, and then after that, we'll have them go into an actual movement. So now that we've mastered the posture, we're here, we did this. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start in that base position, knees directly over our second toe. We're gonna internally rotate our hips in, and then back over our second toe. What I wanna make sure is my feet does not rotate off of the floor. I wanna make sure, I kinda call it, keep your pinky toe, your big toe, and your heels pressed down to the floor as hard as you can so that the movement comes from your hip and not from your leg just bending side to side like this. So again, we're gonna go 10 times like this. 1, under control, 2, 3. I'll do that for 10 times as I get to that. Then once I get to that, we'll finish off real quick with a drop. So now what I wanna do is land in that base position from something explosive. So we'll go hands on your hips, and I'll say 1. And I want to make sure as they land into it, they can maintain that posture for something explosive. And we'll go 2, up, 3, up. And what you want to check for is, as they're going down, are they doing this and then recovering, or can they maintain that posture through the movement on the way down and then land? And then we're done. We'll take these off. Now you can do these. You can do some things like some ball handling. You can have them put the mini bands on, and they can kind of go through some ball handling work while they're working on hip activation. The thing is, you don't want to do this too much, right? Because we're working on activation and we're trying to get warmed up. You don't want to go to the point where now you're fatiguing the muscles. So where now once you start playing the sport, they're so tired that they can't work for you. We just want to turn them on and make sure that they're ready to do the work that we're asking for, and make sure that when they're about to play the sport, their muscles are ready to assist within the movements and then transfer the forces where they need to be transferred. Otherwise, if those muscles don't recognize it's time to work, other parts of the body will take over, which will limit your athlete's ability to, well, be athletic. So that's a quick and condensed way to explain how we use mini bands, why, and why your athlete should be using it for their next sport. So anyways, Coach White, I'll check you later. About to get to this session. Peace.